Jake Keegan and David Harris are on with Paul Bravo, current soccer executive with a club out in California that we'll talk about a bit more. Extensive career in U.S. soccer with at the highest of levels, and we're really excited to have you on. Thanks so much for coming on, Paul.
No, thanks guys for having me. It's it's been a long time, so anytime I can go back and talk about the old days is always a positive for me.
Great. So, Jake, you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big admirer of all the old MLS kind of clips, and I was just telling you, I just recently was watching that 96 kind of year in review in MLS. It was like a Sports Center review, and also with my coach being John Harkes here with the Greenville Triumph. We have a few like big screen, flat screens in our locker room, and occasionally we'll kind of put some old clips of his on. So I'm a huge fan of kind of the history of the game, and I can't wait to discuss a bit of that. We have some great stories.
I'm looking forward to it as well, guys. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, very excited. So just to start off, we just I wanted to start with the current day, just to get an understanding of where you're at now.
Sure.
So the current club you're with, is it the Force North Soccer?
So basically what I've done since I've moved back to California, I moved back to California in 2017. Spent a year of kind of observing. We had the technical director at the current club. It's Dianza Force in Cupertino, California. So I spent a year observing the technical director, who was Albert Puig. Albert was the former FC Barcelona academy director from 2010 to 2014. He was also the assistant coach for New York City FC after he left our club with Dom. He was close with Dom. So I spent a year doing that, and since then, probably around middle of 2018, I've been the academy director for both the boys and the girls side. But as part of my responsibilities, I'm also the executive director for one of our alliance clubs.
Okay.
I've got a lot of balls in the air, but it's fun to be back in the area that I grew up. This is where it all started for me, and kind of the plan is this is where it's all going to end. So
wow.
So being back home and giving back to the community has been really important to me, and was always important to me, even as an executive in MLS. When I left Colorado in 2016, I was not only the VP of soccer operations, I was the technical director, I was the U12 head coach. So I always enjoyed being a part of what was going on at the grassroots level, and it's the pace is where I want what I want in my life at this point.
Great. And the California Thorns, is that the women's or the girls?
So the California Thorns were our girls branch during the DA years. Obviously, that has disbanded. So we've moved the girls back to ECNL. And with that, we did a rebrand back to the Force, because that's where we were prior to the girls DA starting up. And that's kind of where we wanted to take it back for us. And so the boys and the girls are now the same. And it's less confusing. I don't have to change in between games and put my Thorn stuff on from my Force stuff. So it's kind of nice.
What is the Dianza Force? Could you just talk a little bit about the club?
So Dianza Force has been around for about 25 years. It's run by my old college roommate, Jeff Beitcher, who I played at Santa Clara with. A lot of ex Santa Clara guys and guys who kind of grew up in the area. It's a nationally recognized club. produced some pretty high level players over the years, not only for the national team, but, especially in the last 3 or 4 years where we primarily send kids to college, but if in the event that they have the talent, we try and find opportunities for them in the professional game as well. So we have a young man at Mines right now that played in our, he's an 03 that played in our national semifinalists from a couple of years ago. We have a young man at Villarreal. We have a young man, Brady Scott, who I think just transferred to Nashville, who was at Cologne for a while.
Right.
And then we've got a young man who's currently at Ajax as well. So the club has always done a really good job of producing talent here in Northern California. Obviously with the pro clubs, the Earthquakes and the Sac Republic, over the years, we fight for the same types of players, right?
Right.
There has been some success over the years. I think 2 years ago, our U17 team was the only undefeated team in the country, leading into the DA playoffs, got to the semifinals, ended up losing in the semifinals. And so the club has always had that kind of success, right? Boys and girls. So it's a hotbed. The area is a hotbed for talent.
Right.
We try and create a high performing environment so that these kids can go on and do what they want to do. I think our last recruiting class, Princeton, Yale, Cornell, Michigan. So it's again, we're producing talent, and not just at the college level, but for the pro game as well.
Great. Jake, do you have anything you want to jump in on?
First, I think it's awesome that what you guys are doing, giving back to the community. And I do think I played against De Anza Force in I think it was a Super Wide Nationals back in the FC West back in, it must have been 2005. It's a really good club back then, and it still is today. How much, being that went to Santa Clara and other people within the club go to Santa Clara, how much do you think that plays into where the student athlete or where the students end up committing to college? Does that play a huge role, or do you guys just kind of sit back and let them make their own?
We are facilitators, right? The most important thing for us is that we're finding the right fit for players. And when they come to us as freshmen, they have a list of about 100 schools. And not every one of those schools is the right fit. So we counsel them, advise them on what might be the best fit based on their talent, what type of school they're looking for, right? And then obviously the costs, right? What sort of opportunity there is from a scholarship standpoint. So it's really about advising, sitting back. I mean, we don't push players to anybody in particular. Our head coach for the U19 team is actually the associate head coach for Santa Clara University. I believe they recruited 3 or 4 of our players from this past season, and only one of them committed. So, again, it's trying to balance, because you don't want to be seen as somebody or a club that just pushes to one university, right? And so, from that standpoint, it's really about doing what's right for the young player, right? And not just what's right for a university, right? And so we try and counsel them on all of those aspects. And ultimately our goal is to develop a well-rounded player, right? And person. So it's not just on the field, but off the field as well. We feel that is really important. And that makes it easier for those players to kind of sift through everything and find that right fit. We don't tell them what they need to do. It's more about guiding them to see what's a good fit and what's not a good fit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dave, do you have anything else for our guest here before I move on to his more exciting maybe playing days?
Well, yeah, just real quick. Does seem like Paul, you still had an interest in jumping back to the pro game in 2019 with Oakland.
Yep.
And maybe just touch on your experience with Oakland and the NISA League.
Sure.
Curious about that.
It was not really it's when I left Colorado, it wasn't really a goal for me to get back into the pro game, because I had, it was a long time, right? It was a grind getting to where I got to, and I took the long road, which is the road that's less traveled, in most instances. The roots thing was, it was presented to me as a startup. I really enjoyed the ownership group, right? Their vision. The brand is obviously second to none. Their brand development and their marketing plan and all of that stuff. It was presented to me as an exhibition season that I would be entering into, and 4 weeks before, actually 3 weeks before the exhibition season started, they said, "Oh well, we're actually going to go straight into a league, and here's our schedule," and we hadn't even started training yet. And so, initially I didn't really want to do it. I felt I was helping. I wanted to help them establish a culture, a philosophy, and a style of play. Those were the three most important things for me. My close friend Eric Yamamoto, who also coaches in our youth club, is the associate head coach at Santa Clara, was a technical advisor for the group. Okay. And so I went into it thinking, okay, well, I'll help them start it up. And then boom, they get into a season, and trying to balance both was difficult. And at the end of the year, it wasn't something that I really wanted to pursue. And so it made sense for us they wanted to be more professional, which fair play to them. And, I wasn't prepared to leave what I was doing at the grassroots level. But it was a really, really good experience. The fan base in Oakland is phenomenal. I mean, they got 5,000. We got 5,000 people at the first game.
Wow.
Jack McInerney scores a hat trick in the first half, and because we had only been training for 3 weeks, we ended up giving away goals. I think we ended up giving away 2 goals in the last 10-15 minutes of the game, and that's kind of how the season went. And we beat a Mexican. At the time, they were top of the second division. And they have now moved into Liga MX, which is the top league. So that was kind of our claim to fame, but it was a fun experience. It was only six games, and 6 months. And so, helping them out and getting that off the ground was an exciting project for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
What do you think, if you were to kind of paint the landscape? There's a lot of big clubs in NISA. Oakland Roots, as you mentioned, under the USL Championship next season announced. But you also have the Cosmos, you have Chattanooga, you have Detroit.
Right.
There's a lot of big American names, especially with the Cosmos. What do you think the best path is for them? Because obviously with the pandemic shortened season this year, it was very tough, and they had a kind of another very strange season from the outside.
I think losing Miami the year before, now losing the Oakland Roots. There's obviously a place in the landscape for a league like that, but you'd like to see everything kind of under one umbrella, right? Ideally, I think there's so many great personalities, ownership groups. I'm close. I know the coach at Detroit. He was with me at the LA Galaxy for a little while, Trevor James. You know, and you'd really like to see everything kind of underneath one umbrella, right? MLS, USL Championship, USL One, whatever that the case is, and can you find a way for it to all fit together and for people to work together? Unfortunately, not everybody sees it that way, right? But that would be a watershed moment for us as a country, right? To be able to have everything kind of fitting nicely, right? And then to have some verticality, and you know, we talk about this promotion and relegation piece and all of that stuff, which you know, seems great in theory, but you know, that's not the way MLS was brought about. So
yeah, it's very difficult when you have MLS owners, especially now with the expansion fees. Just what are they, 9 figures now? It's very difficult to ask an owner to be like, no, you'll sign this, you'll pay this fee, and then the next year you'll go down to USL Championship.
Well, I think that's a part of the reason why it's a secure investment, right? So there's no like, you know, our ownership group, KSC, owned Arsenal, right? Arsenal, you know, that's a big risk, because if you drop down into the championship, there's a huge loss in revenue, right? So it's a big risk for an ownership group like that. But to have the safety net of MLS has allowed for that sort of that type of owner, right? What I mean by that is the billion-dollar owners who see that the game can thrive and actually, well, first of all, survive and then thrive, right? Without having to lose their investment. There's two sides to that argument, but to be fair, that's the way the league has always been set up, right? There was, at one point, it was 10 million, right? To have to own a club, right? But what you see today in MLS is unbelievable. Don Garber has done a great job of setting that league up for huge success. And you see the influx of talent. You see the influx of finance into the league. It's great. It's great to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go back a bit, and then we'll come back, I think, to
Sure.
the more modern stuff with the MLS. So we'll just kind of do like a retrospective on your career, and you know, we could even start with Santa Clara National Championship and playing for Steve Sampson.
Yeah. That was I wouldn't say that's where it started, David. It actually started for me. You know, kind of as it's been unknown in my career, but my experience at Foothill Junior College was probably the start. Steve Sampson and Mitch Murray, who were the head coach and the assistant coach at Santa Clara at the time, you know, that Foothill College was a part of their coaching start. So Foothill has a great deal of meaning for me in my career. George Avakian, who was the head coach at that time, was a well-known character around the country. And they were turning out pros right out of junior college. They were sending players on to some top universities. They were beating the USFs of the day back in that day, which was you know, quite impressive, and that's really where it started for me, right? You know, when I decided when it came time to make a decision on where to go to school, we had lost the state championship my first year. Won the state championship my second year in junior college here in California. And then the three schools that I looked at were University of San Diego, which was an up-and-coming program, UCLA, which was, you know, everybody knows UCLA, and then there was Santa Clara, who again, was an upstart, and Santa Clara was where I grew up, or San Jose is where I grew up, but Santa Clara was close. It was a place where my friends and my family can come watch me.
Right.
And the two recruits that ended up at Santa Clara from Foothill, myself and Jeff Beitcher, were able to make a huge impact in that first year at Santa Clara as juniors. We ended up going undefeated. I think the season ended 20-3. We played the University of Virginia in the NCAA final. It ended 1-1. It ended 1-1 in Piscataway, New Jersey, in a snowstorm prior to kickoff. That ended 1-1. We went through 6 overtimes in the freezing cold. Still nobody to score a goal, so they just called us co-champs. And I think that next year they ended up. Going to penalty kicks. So that was a great experience for me, and really the thing that kickstarted my career, going from Foothill, kind of that learning process, going from Foothill, playing a lot, playing under a guy who was able to break his players down and build them back up, right, in a good way. And I think that set us up, certainly myself and Jeff at Santa Clara, to have the type of success that we did. And that first year at Santa Clara, we thought we were invincible, and that every year was going to be like that. I think we ended up starting the next season, my senior year, again on maybe an 8-game run where we were undefeated. They had a run prior to myself getting there where it was like another 11 games that they had gone undefeated. So over a 3 season span, I think we were unbeaten in 40 games at Santa Clara. And then we fly out to Clemson and got our lunch handed to us by Jimmy Glenn scoring 4 goals. They beat us 4-2. And so we weren't so invincible.
I'm just trying to think of how you're talking about the Piscataway, but I'm thinking of the game with Virginia and co-champions, and I can't imagine how Sampson and Arena enjoyed the idea of having to share the national championship.
Well, it's the East Coast Mafia. It's the East Coast Mafia versus the West Coast Mafia in the soccer tournament, right? And that's the way it went for a while, right? Those two men ended up becoming national team coaches, right? Coaching in World Cups. Obviously, Bruce has gone on to unbelievable success. And I whenever I see him, he's always very good to me, going all the way back to those years. And then I still see Steve on the recruiting trail. He's at Cal Poly now, but man, what a time for me. At that point, it was a really, it's hard to explain because there was no MLS, right? There was nothing. And you see what the success of the college player today, they have everything. They have this great league in front of them, and we were just, we were scratching it together, right? We were playing college soccer, and then I would go up to San Francisco and play in the men's league up here and get paid $250 a game to go play during the off season. It was awesome, right? I mean, that was
completely okay with the NCAA, right?
That was the life. Well, yeah, I mean, it's reasonable cost, right? I mean, that paid for a meal and some gas to get up to San Francisco. We played for Lothar Osiander up there, who's another great name in U.S. soccer circles. And so, that was the place to be for us if we were in Northern California. You wanted to play for the Greek Americans or El Farolito up in San Francisco, because El Farolito would go get the players from the Mexican First Division and Second Division, bring them up. And the Greek Americans were always a national power. We won an Open Cup one year with them. And so that was kind of my balancing act while I was in college. And then you finish up college and you're like, well, there's no MLS, there's no 12-month contract. What is that? Right? You're scratching it together by playing half a season in the USISL or the A-League at the time. And you're either coaching on the side or you're playing indoor soccer. And I had no interest in playing indoor soccer. And so that was kind of my path. And I was happy with that. Right? I was fine. I was content with it. It wasn't going to make me a millionaire. But I was living the dream and doing what I loved. I still do that, but back in the day, it was great.
You play over 50 now, or
no?
Over 40.
No, my limit is U12 and below. Right. That's so I can get into a position game as long as I call it the Carlos Valderrama rule. Right? Where you don't move too far away from a circle. Right? So that's my limit. No, the fear is and I see this with friends and old teammates. Like you go out and you try and play. There's we don't have fitness anymore. All it takes is one bad movement and there goes your Achilles. Right. I can't tell you how many of my old teammates have just popped an Achilles playing pickup soccer. And that's not something that I banged my head against the wall for a long time as a player. I don't need to, I'm not looking to train for anything. So I get on my exercise is my mountain bike. So.
No, I don't bring that up to make fun of the age. No. I do a lot with the leagues here in New York and Long Island where I live. And we actually have a lot of the guys from that era that would have been playing for the Rough Riders or the other teams that, comparable to what you would have been playing in the USISL, and they're really playing over 50. They do. A bunch of the Rough Riders play for a local team here in Massapequa. So guys like that, So
and I'm sure those games. I'm sure those games are worth paying to go see.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
you can't turn the competitiveness off. Doesn't matter. 15 or 7, still going to be.
And Jake, really, that is the danger, right? Because you cannot turn it off. Like you get out on the field and you like I went and did my academy director's course license, and we would go out and play and we would joke around, and like once you get out on the field and you start playing, it's like you don't want to lose, right? You do not want to lose, and you do not want to look bad, right? So it's you have to show a lot of restraint. Otherwise you get hurt. And it takes a lot longer for you to recover nowadays. So you got plenty of time, Jake. Don't worry.
Not as young as I look, unfortunately.
Well, take off the hat and then you'll
no gray hair, don't worry.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'm still in pandemic mode, right? I haven't cut my hair in 7 months. I don't shave.
I just did mine last night. So
yeah. So.
I did Dave when he came on. I was like, "Is this our guest? No, this isn't."
That's awesome.
So, you kind of touched on the Greek Americans with the Open Cup, and could you talk a little bit about the Greek Americans, the San Francisco Bay Blackhawks, APSL, that kind of pre-MLS era, just a little bit, what
absolutely
the win, what it was like.
Absolutely. So I think it was a unique time in U.S. soccer circles, right? This was right around the '90 World Cup. Not a lot of us were professional. Playing up in the city was kind of it kept our juices going, so to speak. The Greek American situation. I mean, this was I think. Well, let me the whole San Francisco Bay Blackhawks. I mean, that was a unique situation, right? Because coming out of college, you had the A League, right? Which is now considered the USL, right? Mm-hmm. You had the A League, and then it turned to USISL, and then it was USL. And so, our local club was owned by a guy by the name of Dan Van Voorhees. Bless his heart, because it was a man that had a huge heart, loved professional soccer, and loved being an owner. I remember his $100 handshakes like they were yesterday after wins, right? he'd come into the locker room at the end, and he'd give everybody a handshake, and there'd be a wad of money in that handshake, which was kind of nice. It's different nowadays. But that group, if you think about the Blackhawks of 1991, 92, so right after I left Santa Clara, you had Marcelo Balboa, you had Danny Pena, you had Mark Doherty, you had Timmy Martin, you had Eric Winalda, you had John Doyle, you had Dominic Kinnear, these, Derek Van Reen, Troy Dyack, the man-child, because he'd grown a beard at 14. He had a beard at 14, and he's never changed since. Yep. He still looks the same. But you look, Paul Holliker. I mean, I can look back on this poster here, and the majority of those players ended up were at the Blackhawks at one time. Jeff Beitcher. It was a really, really talented team. We had won the A League my first year, so that would have been 91, 91. We won the A League that first year, and our team was I mean, to train with those guys was a real highlight after college, and being in the same locker room with those guys, competing every day, winning the A League, was a real great experience for me. I mean, I still consider a lot of those guys close friends, right, because of the experiences that we went through. It was a 6-month season. The coach was Laurie Calloway,
right.
And
first coach was a Gullit too.
Yeah. And so, great experience. I ended up tearing my ACL in the second game of the final. We went there to Albany. We played Albany in the final. We lost to them. We lost to them there, I think 1-0. Came home. And literally 15 minutes into the game, I tore my ACL. Played the rest of the half. We ended up winning.
Jake was at that game, by the way.
What's that?
Baby Jake was at that game. That's Jake country, Albany, upstate.
Yeah. Okay. Their group was a talented group. We came home. I think Paul Mariner was the assistant coach up there.
Wow.
At that time. We came home. We beat them at home. Ended up winning the championship that year. The following year, we got a berth into the what is now the CONCACAF Champions League, right?
Wow.
For winning the league. Another great experience for me. We go to Belize. We play a team from Belize there twice. Ended up advancing. Played Real España from Honduras because they were going through some security issues. I think they were in a war at that time. The games were played up in San Francisco at old Kezar Stadium. And we ended up beating them aggregate over a two game aggregate 3-1 to set us up to play in the semifinal against Club America. And we went down to Azteca Stadium and ended up losing the game. I want to say 3-1. We ended up scoring. It was 1-1 late. Troy Dyack turns and punches out Hugo Sanchez in the middle of the game. Gets a red card. We go on to lose the game 3-1. Come home, beat them 2-0. And at that time, the aggregate was a little different. They ended up advancing out of it. So that was a great experience for the club. For me, I was recovering from an ACL, so I didn't get to experience all of those incidents. Actually, I take that back. I experienced Belize and Real España, and then tore my ACL again right before the Club America game, and then that put me on the shelf for almost 18 months.
Wow.
And so it limited my exposure over that time. Actually, moving back to the second game against Albany in the final, Bora was at the game, comes into the locker room at the end and says, "Hey, you've been called into the national team, but you're hurt." So it was one of those situations where it just kept catching up to me, right? And then 4 months later, I came back, started playing again. At 6 months, I endured a tackle in the middle of a game wearing a brace. Somebody went right through the crack of my knee, and ended up tearing my ACL, my MCL, and cartilage as well. And so, I thought my career was over at that point. Two ACLs in the early 90s. Most people don't come back from stuff like that. And I, was able to persevere and it was grueling, but when I came back, it was right before the 94 World Cup. And I had just been able to get rid of the brace. My chances of making any sort of dent in that group was lost because of my recovery time. Yeah. But the for me, the 94 World Cup was an unbelievable experience. Even though we had the U.S. here in Northern California, and a lot of my old teammates, Brazil was their home base was Los Gatos, California, which, if you've ever been to Los Gatos, it's like a sleepy little town that woke up during that time. You had the Brazilians actually camped out in a hotel in Los Gatos, And then the streets in Los Gatos were closed off because there was so many Brazilian fans that invaded the area. They basically just closed everything off. It was like a Mardi Gras.
Wow.
Every single night, singing and dancing up and down the main street. They closed the main street. Great experience. But even more than that, Brazil was training at Santa Clara University. Laurie Calloway was the liaison for the team. And they always needed extra players to come in and train with them.
Oh, wow.
So here I am, right? Training on a daily basis with the Brazilian national team. And that was something that, Romário, Bebeto, Cafu, name it, Leonardo, Rai, right? These guys were legends. Tafarel was the goalkeeper. And there was this little, no, I wouldn't say little, there was this young, there was this young bucktooth kid that would just run around the field and try and dribble everybody.
Yeah.
And that was Ronaldo.
Yeah.
The original Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Right. And this was, when I look back on it, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
That was a phenomenal experience. And I spent 2 weeks with them every single day. I would come into training. They would need players to play in the inter squad games. So I'd go in and I'd play for the second team against the first team every week. Russia was in the same area, and so when they needed games, the Greek Americans would show up and we'd give them a game. So I got to play against Russia. I got to play with Brazil against their first team. It was a great experience, and I was going to the games and getting smashed. Right. So I got the best of both worlds. And so that was a, for me in 94, there was a lot of chatter in my head about, well, do I just chuck it in and get a real job, or do I keep kind of grinding it out? Right. And 94 came along, and MLS was announced because in order for them to have the World Cup, they were supposed to have a Division One league set up within 2 years. So that gave me the itch again, and went back to training on a regular basis. Tried to really focus on getting healthy in time for the start of, we didn't know what it was called, some pro league. And so I had a coach. I had Steve Sampson tell me, look, you don't want to look back and say, well, woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Yeah. You may as well, as long as you have an opportunity, you may as well give it the best that the best that you can, and make a go of it. And so, that experience was a good one. We didn't really have a lot going on during that time. It was still kind of playing up in the city. The A-League had folded. The USISL wasn't what it was. So really anybody who was a pro in this area went and found a team in San Francisco.
Okay.
Right? So going back to the San Francisco League and playing in those leagues, that was like playing in the A-League for us. Yeah. Right? And I think there was a time there, guys, where the San Jose Oaks, El Farolito, and the Greek Americans had won they had won the 3 straight Open Cups. Yeah. They are all playing in the same league. Right. So that was the quality of the league that was being run at that time. And so, it kept us kind of ticking over. and until MLS came along in '96.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story. Going back to that Brazil training experience, I got to touch on that a little bit more.
Sure.
In that you were mostly with the second team, obviously, and Ronaldo himself was. He did. I don't think he played a game in that tournament, did he?
No, he didn't play a game, but he was. It's funny because he would get the ball and just start dribbling, and guys would stop and start yelling at him in Portuguese.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't speak Portuguese, but I could tell what they were pissed at him because he'd just get the ball and go, and he didn't care what anybody thought. Right.
Yeah.
It was fun.
He was there for the experience. He was the 17-year-old. He was the next Pele.
Yep.
And he was there for the experience.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Any English speakers in that squad, or were they all Portuguese?
Dunga.
Dunga.
Dunga was an English speaker, and he could not contain himself with his overall experience in the United States. He was like, this is a great place. I want to come back and I want to live here, right? But again, he was a guy that you could see his leadership qualities, but good English. Romário, like, you didn't want to talk to him, right? You didn't want to ask him any questions because he always had this. He was like look on his face like he was chewing a wasp, right? And just trying to, you just stay away from people. You just stay away from people like that, right? Bebeto, nicest guy. Cry was the nicest guy. Most of these guys were kind of, appreciative and good guys, right? And you didn't want to kick any of them. You could not, nobody wanted to get close to. I think somebody ended up kicking Romário once, and then he got kicked out of the training session, and he never came back. I remember Ronaldo going in on a one-on-one with Eric Yamamoto, who I brought up Eric was our goalkeeper at Santa Clara. They brought him in as an extra goalkeeper, and goes in on a one-on-one with Eric. Ball gets a little too far away from him, and he puts on the after jets, right? And Eric comes out, and he basically knees Eric in the head, and Eric just, he's out like a light. And he comes to, and he's asking, well, what happened? What happened? And we told him, you just got kneed by Ronaldo. And he's like, oh, this is great. So these are the types of things that were going on at that time. We didn't know. We were young and had no care.
Yeah, I'd imagine they weren't as, like, if it was me now and I was with the Portuguese camp or the Argentinian camp, I would be mesmerized because you see Ronaldo, you see Messi on TV week after week. But at the time when these guys, you knew of them, and I'm sure you knew of their caliber, but I'm sure it wasn't the same kind of awe.
No. Obviously, you get soccer 24/7 here, right? You can go on your computer onto Fubo and watch, soccer anytime, any day, right? A lot of these guys, you didn't know so much about, but you knew the good ones, right? You knew who the big names were. You didn't know who Ronaldo was, but you knew that once it started to click over the years, you're like, God, what a great experience that was, right? So fun times. Great to reminisce about it.
Great stories.
Yeah. Oh, there's not only were you going and training with them, but then you'd go party with all their fans in Los Gatos that night, right? and it was I would show up and I would see people that I knew from high school that hated soccer, and they were like, "This is great, World Cup's here." Right, and all they were concerned about was, this is a great party, this is fun, right? It really was a time that was it was just an unbelievable experience all the way around, on and off.
To me, it sounds like the soccer of Woodstock.
Yeah, yeah, it really was. And, you know, there's probably never going to be a book written about it, but, you know, every now and then these stories come up.
Well, that's why we have a podcast to share
Yeah,
something.
that's why you guys have podcasts, right?
Maybe
So,
work on
we,
a
don't,
book later.
we don't need a book. We're in a different world now, I guess.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, I fast forwarding, I had the experience with, the David Beckham experiment, right?
Right.
Having been at the LA Galaxy when we
Yeah.
signed David, and you know, they needed a book for that. So
Yeah. Why don't we jump into Beckham, since, you know, we don't have to go year by year. Like, you know,
yeah.
what would you like to share about the Beckham experiment?
Is this the X-rated version, or is this the kind of the toned down version?
Whatever you want, Paul.
You know, I you know, it was a tough time for everybody, right? Because the LA Galaxy at the time were, you know, I had just come into, let's take a step back. I had retired in 2012, did a year of coaching, did another year at a youth club, and then took the UCLA assistant's job. And then 2 years later, Frank Yallop gets the head coaching job a year prior to David showing up.
Right.
Frank calls me and says, "Hey, I'm looking for an assistant coach. Would you have an interest?" So said, "Sure, why not?" I mean, college game is really something that I enjoy, but the pro game, you know, I'm always trying to test myself. So I took the assistant's position with Frank. And so going through that whole process, we were identifying players. This was before the David Beckham rule. They were talking about this being implemented. Nobody really thought that it would ever get to that level. And then all of a sudden, the CEO of AEG comes down and says, "Hey, who would you rather have?" Right? This player, or Beckham? And Frank kind of looks around and says, "Well, I'll take that guy." Right. And it was David Beckham. David was at Real Madrid. He was coming to the end of his contract. And, you know, the LA Galaxy were in disarray. They had just fired Steve Sampson, I believe. Was it Steve or Ziggy? Anyway, one of those two, one of those guys. And Alexi Lalas was the president of the club. They were in the midst of you know, a mid-season crumble. Frank takes over. They missed the playoffs for the first time in the history of the league. Right. Halfway through the next year, we have in January, David Beckham gets signed. Right. And his arrival isn't until the summer of that following year. And so nobody really knew what we were about to go through. Right. It was a tough time because the Galaxy were they were on a downward slide. Right. And they were trying to bring it back up and out of the ashes. It wasn't going to happen overnight. But, you know, when they announced that David Beckham was signing for the LA Galaxy, a lot changed. Right, a lot changed. The front offices of most teams weren't robust. Right, you had a president, you had a head coach, and you had the staff. That was kind of what it was back then. And so, you know, the arrival of David Beckham changed a lot of things, not only on the field, but in the front offices of clubs around the league. Right. I ended up leaving my assistant coaching position 6 months into his start. So he comes in July he gets there. He's just come off of an ankle injury, right? They had just won La Liga, Real Madrid, and he shows up and he's hobbling around on one leg. And we get told, well, he needs to play. We're playing Chelsea in an exhibition, right? That's his first game. Sold out. I mean, we've got it's sold out, and then the grass bank that was behind one of the goals is filled. This game is televised on ESPN. And this guy's hurt. He obviously can't play, but nobody at AEG really cared. We were concerned about his health and his well-being. They said no, he has to play, right? So we play this. We're playing this game. We Drogba scores. I believe it was against Ty Harden. And about 10, 15 minutes left in the game, there's like a wrestling, the crowd starts to ooh and ah, and David gets up and he starts warming up. Right? I'm like, okay, we're going to put him in. Okay, great. Let's go. Get the substitute. I'm the assistant coach, so I got to get the substitute thing ready. And, I'm going through his set pieces with David Beckham now, right? Yeah. It's not Hercules Gomez that I'm going with. Herc at the time, I think was in the team, or one of those guys, right? It's not like you're going through it with a college kid, right? It's freaking David Beckham. And then I go and sit down. He takes his shirt off, and I could have sworn there was 50,000 women, moms, in the stands who just started screaming. It was like I was at a Beatles concert or something like that. I've never been at a Beatles concert, but I can only imagine what it was like. Flashing going off, everything around the stadium, and this guy's just standing there without his shirt on. And putting his regular uniform on, and that was the start of David Beckham in MLS, right? He hobbled around. We ended up losing the game 1-0, and then that night, his friends in Hollywood decided to host a welcoming party at Mocha. This is the A-list of Hollywood. This is my first experience of the traveling circus, right? And here we are. We go to this party, and Will and Jada Pickett-Smith, and you name it, they're there at this party, and we're partying and having fun. And these guys, you've got a kid who's making $18,000 a year, hobnobbing with A-listers and dancing, and 12 o'clock rolls around. This was the best part of the night. 12 o'clock rolls around, and they open up a snack buffet. The snack buffet was In-N-Out burgers. And so that's what we feasted on at midnight. Got back to partying, and it was great. Everything was great. I mean, this was going to be this was going to forever change, and it did forever change MLS. But what I realized was it's very easy to get caught in all of that hoopla, right? And lose focus of what's important. And I felt that that over my time there, we lost focus, right? And we didn't really have the leadership to kind of right the ship and say, hey, no, wait, we're here for a reason, right? Yeah. Not only are we here to raise the level of MLS, but we want to win games, right? And we want to do it the right way. And all we did was create a, I mean, if you can imagine what it would have been like to travel with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus, that's what it was, right? We would go on these extravagant, we would go to play games. I think the first road trip we took was DC, New York, Toronto. It was like a full, I mean, we were gone for 10 days, right? And everywhere we went, there was a party. Everywhere we went, people wanted to host a party for us, right? And so we lost sight of the actual competition. And when you have 20-something-year-old kids who are starstruck by it, right, you can lose focus real quick. And we traveled first class. We took tours to Asia. We went to China. We went to Hong Kong. We went to Korea. We played in Australia, New Zealand. This was part of the plan to recoup the salary, right? You'd go and you'd make these net $1 million, and that would pay the salary.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so, the great thing is that we were traveling first class and doing all these great things, but we didn't know how to handle a security detail. We didn't know how to handle going through the back door of hotels, and we didn't know how to handle, flying commercial, right? Any of that stuff, right? We didn't know how to handle a high profile athlete that had 3 layers in front of him, right? So you couldn't actually get to the athlete to have those conversations. So there was some give and take. There were some great stories as well.
Oh yeah.
And we're in I'll tell you one.
Okay.
We're in Australia. We get on the bus to go to the game. It's out the back door. The street is a full block, and it's 8 people deep just to watch us walk from the door of the hotel out to our bus, just so they can get a glimpse of David Beckham. We get on the bus and we're waiting there for everybody, right? We're waiting for the rest of the staff, and we needed to wait for the cops the police to come so that they could give us our escort. And all of a sudden, there's again commotion, and somebody, the guys are now looking at this woman next to, I think it was her husband, and she's like, "I want to get on the bus. I want to come on the bus," right? And the guys are like, "Oh my God, what's gonna happen?" And she's like, I'll do anything to get on the bus." So somehow she makes it. The reason why she was able to come onto the bus was because she had taken her shirt and brought it over her head, and the guys went ape shit. This was right before a game, right? They went ape, and they're like, "Oh my God." And so she got to come on the bus, say hello, and then come back off of the bus. I mean, this is the type of circus that we were dealing with, right?
Did she put her shirt on before she came on the bus, or
she put her shirt on back? She put her shirt back on before she came on the bus. But it's so that, hey, you guys are the only ones who got that. The book never got that. So
thank you, Paul.
you're very welcome. But that experience, it ended basically when they fired Alexi. We brought in the Ruud Gullit experience.
I was going to ask about that, but yeah, I'm a big favorite of mine back in the day.
Holy smokes! I love, Ruud Gullit was one of my heroes. The 1988 Dutch team was fantastic. You go watch. I think the name of the show is Tour, where they do the Euro Championship kind of recap, right? This guy is a legend, right? And when you
Boston, right guard.
Yeah. You talk to him about football, his idea about football and playing the game, phenomenal. Phenomenal. But as a coach, left a little to be desired. Right? And they hired Ruud. There was this thing going on because we had Landon, Donovan, and you had David Beckham. And they couldn't seem to coexist. Right? For one reason or another. And so in order to maybe get a little bit more out of Landon, they thought bringing a taskmaster who had done everything and could put people in their place by just saying, "Hey, I've done what you've done, and I've done more." Right? That might fix the problem. It only exacerbated it, right? It was, I would show up for training because I was now the director of soccer. 6 months into this, before they hired, before the second half. So once David came on, I was the assistant coach for the first 2 months, and Alexi felt he needed somebody in between myself and Frank, or himself and Frank, who could be kind of a voice of reason, somebody that both Frank could trust and Lexi could trust.
Right.
And they chose me to be that person. So that's what started my executive career in the front office. I became the director of soccer. And so I was no longer on the field with these guys, but I would come down for training, listen to what was going on for training, give any updates on player movement or anything like that. That was for me, huge, because being on the field was a real stressor, right? You're stressed because you need to win, you're not winning. And Frank was under a huge amount of pressure. He still had 1 year left on his contract. And we went into that off season, and the San Jose Earthquakes came knocking on his door. They had just brought the franchise back. So Frank left. They brought in Ruud. His press conference, his initial press conference was awesome, right? It was stacked. It was packed. I remember him talking about how important it was to bring in more high-level players. And I was looking at Dan Beckerman saying, I hope your checkbook is ready, because this sounds like it's going to get a little out of control here. Needless to say, I don't think he was really interested in putting all of his effort into being a coach and being on the field and trying to make the project successful, right? We would show up, and he'd be the last one in, and they'd go out to training, and then he'd come in, talk about what he wanted to do that night, and then he'd be the first one to leave. And so I felt that was off, and I felt at that time it was disrespectful to the league, right? To have somebody, this high profile coach, this person who could help the league, right? I'm coming from playing in the A-League, right? And never not wanting to take anything for granted, and I just felt that was a bit disrespectful.
First game ever in the league's history.
Yep.
Successful playing career.
All of that stuff, but it didn't really resonate with these guys, because they were world renowned, right? And anything that they did or it was like it was like they could just show up and everything would be great for them. And you actually have to work, right? You actually have to put the time and the effort into it. And so that was an interesting experience. I remember going to the first combine during the off season, and Ruud didn't show up to the combine, right? So your head coach is not there. Your assistant coaches are there, but it's just Kobe Jones was the assistant coach at the time.
Yeah.
They had named Kobe the assistant. And so now somebody has to do the work, right? Got to get ready for the draft. Actually Ruud, I take that back. Ruud showed up for one day. He watched the 2 games or the 4 games, whatever the 4 teams play. He gave me a list of 1 player that he wanted to draft.
Was he right?
Absolutely not. Actually, I take that back. The player that he wanted was Chance Myers.
Okay.
Right. And Chance I had at UCLA. I recruited Chance to UCLA, so I knew what type of a player he was. And then he wanted a left wing. If he wasn't available, I think we had the number 4 pick. If he wasn't available, he wanted a left winger from Washington with the number 4 pick, and I was like, that's way too high. So no. Chance Meyer ended up going number 1 overall. So now we're 3 picks away, and I've got a dilemma because we can't take the kid from Washington because he's graded out as a round 2 or round 3 prospect, and you can't take him at the number 4. So what the heck do you do, right? And I was able to convince both Kobe and Ruud via text message with Alexi's blessing that we should draft Sean Franklin.
Okay.
Sean Franklin was a kid that I worked with in the Galaxy youth setup who went to Cal State Northridge. And I thought Sean was going to be a fantastic outside back who also played center back. And we ended up getting the left winger from Washington in the 2nd round. So it ended up working out for us. I think Sean ended up being the rookie of the year that year. We didn't make the playoffs. And so to have the rookie of the year come from the team that didn't make the playoffs. And I think by the middle of the year, towards the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken, Ruud was gone. Right. And so was Alexi. Had been let go at the same time Ruud had been let go. And I am now sitting there looking around like, what the heck's going on here? I'm the director of soccer. Everybody above me and below me has been fired. And where am I going? So they ended up hiring
Colorado soon enough, but
so they ended up hiring Bruce, which was the best hire that they could have done. Bruce came in, basically changed a lot of things, and was able to get David and Landon on the same page. And the rest is history for the LA Galaxy. That year, I ended up moving. The Colorado Rapids opened up their technical director's role, and that was the club that I had played most of my career for. And so it was an easy decision for me to go back to Colorado and run the front office there. So
how did you? We kind of jumped over your playing career in MLS. Is there anything from that? Okay.
Don't mind. I just have one question from this era.
Yeah, go for it.
The era. I mean, it's well documented. When you watch things on the Galaxy and during Beckham's tenure, you hear the Beckham and the Donovan kind of icy stories.
Yep.
And from an outsider point of view, they're both obviously world class, or especially Beckham, and they're both professionals.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, from an outsider's point of view, it's tough to understand why those two guys can't kind of see eye to eye. They don't have to be best friends off the pitch, but why can't they see eye to eye in terms of what's going on with the Galaxy? And what do you think that kind of is? Was it just ego? Was it they both?
I think Landon had been look, I have the utmost respect for both men, right? For what they've done in their career, what they've done in MLS. Landon was the man for the LA Galaxy, right? For a number of years. And then, we signed David, and David is the man now. And so there's this dynamic going on between the two. Initially, it was fine, but when you don't have success, right, you start to get finger pointing, right? Everybody starts to look outside as to what the excuse is. And, it was cancerous, to be fair, Jake, that these two men couldn't get on the same page, or that we couldn't get them on the same page. And maybe we didn't have enough leadership from all of our, whether it's Alexi or Frank or whoever, right, to be able to deal with it. I mean, it was a huge issue. I mean, I can remember sitting in a room having a meeting where the room is split. You have Landon Donovan on one side, you have David Beckham on the other side. And in that, you have the group that is closer to David, and then you have the group that was closer to Landon. And at the end of the year, the group that was closer to Landon, a lot of those guys had either been shipped off, right, or cut, right? And so, I thought what they tried to do, what Ruud tried to do. I mean, Ruud tried to get after Landon, sit on him, right? Tell him he wasn't that good, right? And that wasn't something that wasn't something that Landon took too kind to, right? He was the DP, right? He was the guy. So, that was a big problem, and it took a huge ego like Bruce to come in and say, hey, this is a kumbaya. Let's get together. If we get this right, we can have a dynasty here, right? And fair play to Bruce, because he was able to do that.
Sprinkle some Robbie Keane in there, and then you got a dynasty.
Well, you sprinkle a little Robbie Keane,
Mike McGee,
Juan Pablo Angel, you name it. But he got it right, and the rest is history. Fair play to those guys. The year, so I left in 2009. They lost in the final to RSL.
Yep.
In penalties. Right. The next year, Colorado won the MLS Cup, and then after that, LA won it. So, that time for me was unique, because I'd gone from a situation that could have been really good working with Bruce to my own situation. We had some success on and off for a few years, and that's how history is. So
let's continue on with that era, and then we can always jump back.
Yeah, whatever. My playing career isn't as exciting as this stuff, though.
It was for me. I enjoyed watching you back in the day. Maybe we'll just touch on it real quick. What were some of, I'm guessing now from what you're saying, you got to when MLS came around and you really got going with the Clash, and then with Colorado. Do you really feel like you got the opportunity? I mean, you played some amazing soccer, leading goal scorer, with the Clash, but with all the injuries and everything, were you able to really showcase?
I look back on it, and I wish that it had come around at 21, 22 when I was 21 or 22 years old.
Right.
My career might have looked a little bit different, but I have no regrets, right? You know, I feel as a player, I've always overachieved. That's because I always worked hard and had a good mentality and tried to be a good teammate, good for the club. You know, my first season in MLS, I was 28 years old,
Yeah.
right? And so, or 27 years old. And so I knew that my career after having 2 ACLs wasn't going to be that long. And, you know, that was clear to me. But while I was doing it, I was going to give it as much as I possibly could every day. I was going to try and bring it every day. My career as a player, look, I as a college player, I was a striker. That was my role. I was the 9. I took the beating from the center backs. I scored the goals. I put my head in where most people didn't want to. You know, I had no fear from that standpoint. When I became a professional, right, I started off as a marking back. Played a little bit as a sweeper back in the day, Laurie Calloway, and kind of settled in early on in my career as a 6. So I was a kind of a defensive midfielder.
Yeah.
When I got to MLS, that's what I was drafted as a holding midfielder. And Laurie knew my talents. We struggled the first couple of games. And he said, you know what? I'm going to try you at striker. I know what you like as a striker. And I scored 2 goals. And then I went on a scoring streak. And, you know, I think I ended that first year in the top 10 in scoring, but starting off as a 6 and then moving into the 9 and then playing a little bit of midfield and kind of all over the you know, jack of all trades, master of none. Right. You know,
was it because Eric Ronaldo just couldn't do his job and score goals?
Well, Eric felt he needed a number. Eric felt he needed a number 10, right? Yeah. And the club thought that was a good idea, and so they traded me to Colorado for Dominic Kinnear and Rafa Amaya, and you know, I think a bag of flat balls might have gone the other way as well. So you know, Colorado was a great change for me. You know, I'd played in the All-Star game the first year of the league. So again, the first game of the league, the first All-Star game of the league, those are things that are you know, special for me. Colorado, I went there, led the team in goals, but I was a midfielder. They played me as like as an 8, right? Center midfielder. We played kind of a 4-4-2, flat in midfield. Marcelo and myself, or Peter Vermes and myself. And I was always the guy that kind of got forward out of that. Led the team in scoring. Kind of toggled back and forth between striker and 8. Played a little bit of outside midfield. I did everything, and I didn't care, right? I just really enjoyed being out on the field and living the dream of a professional soccer player. You know, my time was cut short because of another ACL. Right, I had played the last 2 years of my career with a partially torn ACL, and 32 came around, and I was like, look, to be fair, I don't want to have to go through another surgery, spend 8 months in rehab, and then try and come back at 33. Right, I had experienced probably everything that I was ever going to experience in the game. We lost in the final my second year in Colorado. We lost to DC United at RFK 2-1. My club was never, you know, it was never a big city club, so we always kind of knew where we fit.
Yeah.
I had the year before I had retired, I had gotten the opportunity by Bruce to play in the Confederations Cup for the U.S.
Yeah.
And um, for me, that was 99, 99 Confederations Cup. So I got to play in a FIFA event. Wasn't a World Cup.
Like Germany, right?
What's that?
Did you play Germany?
Played Germany. Had an assist. Drew the foul that got us the free kick that Joe Max Moore ended up scoring. So I got the assist on Ben Olsen's first goal, and then drew the foul to give to set us up for a free kick that Joe Max Moore put in the back of the net. Played against Saudi Arabia, scored a goal, right, in the third place game. So, I got to a point where I was like, this is my time. I've had a great run at it. I'm never going to play in a World Cup. So let's get on with the next phase in my life. And so, that, ended up, being the leading goal scorer for the Colorado Rapids as a midfielder. So I was the leading goal scorer for the Colorado Rapids club up until 2011. When Connor Casey overtook me.
Okay.
I joke with a few of my old the guys that that kind of were on the cusp. But I told Connor that I thought about trading him before he clinched me. But no, this is So I look, I wouldn't call it the greatest career in the world, but it was my career, and I really enjoyed the time. I'd like to be remembered as somebody who always kind of put effort in, right? I may not have been the most skilled, but I outworked everybody and tried to play the game the right way.
It was a lot of fun watching you back in the day. I watched you quite a bit. So, it was a lot of people enjoyed, I'm not just saying that because you're on. I'd say that to Jake, it was a lot of fun watching you back in the day.
So Paul, Dave was like kind of like a little fangirl when we sent out a few emails, obviously, to kind of get some guests, and he's like, "Oh, we got Paul Bravo." I mean, I'm sorry, I did not recognize the name, but Dave was
okay,
like,
Jake, it's okay.
Oh, we got Paul Bravo. This is amazing. I looked you up, obviously, and then I was like, oh, wow, this is a great guest. But now, kind of looking back, I actually think I was maybe 6 years old. I grew up in New York, but my parents' best friends lived in Colorado. Okay. And my soccer game, it was on my brother's birthday, July 4th. I'm pretty sure it was 97, 98.
I scored 2 goals. I scored 2 goals in the 97 4th of July game.
Was it against the Metro Stars?
No, that might have been 98.
98. I think I was at the 98 game.
98. Yeah, I remember. I think I got kicked in the mouth in that game and scored a goal. But yeah, those we played San Jose the first year. So I got traded from San Jose in 90 at the end of the 96 season to Colorado, and I must have scored half of my 50 goals against San Jose every time we played against them from that point on.
Did you celebrate your goal?
I did. I celebrated with a it was a really difficult time for me when I got traded, right? Because it's home, playing in front of friends and family, all of that stuff. But I did celebrate. At in San Jose when I scored a couple of goals against them. My parents, my brothers would always come to the game, and my claim when I was in San Jose was I would always jump into the stand after I scored a goal. So all of that was happening. But yeah, It is what it is. I really enjoyed the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So
I think your generation was just so important for the future of American soccer. I mean, you look at it where MLS is now,
yeah,
I mean, it's night and day, and it's a credit to all you guys. I mean, the guys obviously that came back, the few that came back from Europe, but also
yeah, yeah,
the rest that started MLS in '96 when you guys didn't even know at first what
yeah,
the league was called.
yeah.
You know, you're gonna have enough teams. You didn't even know when the start date was.
Yeah, every year you didn't know if you were coming back to play another season.
Yeah.
Right now you don't have that worry anymore. Now you have everything there. I mean, it's amazing and great for them, right? Great for the players nowadays. And the one thing that I realized when I left Colorado in 2016 was, look, I had a great run. I've been there. I've done it. I won an MLS Cup as an exec. Help raise the bar in the country in my own way, maybe not in the same manner as a Balboa or a Vermes or a Tab Ramos or any of these guys, but right below there was a group of players that was needed in order for this thing to really take off, right? And I believe that was my role, and I'm fine with that. I really am. So good times.
Well,
Hey, thank you for taking me back down memory lane.
I know but with my experiences with John, it's you can tell like your eyes, John and you guys are the same. Your eyes light up when you talk about your playing. Can you just kind of elaborate on? I know coaching is great, and you get a ton of like kind of satisfaction from it, but there's nothing like playing, and I can tell like the joy it brings back to people's faces, and I hope I'll be that in 20 years.
No, playing is, I mean, being the experience of playing at that level has been, it's I hide a lot of my stuff. And then when I go back and I reminisce about it, it's like, man, like I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for the world. I told you about that moment in my career between 92 and 94, where it was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Right. And I'm so grateful for the people around me who supported me and gave me the push to continue, because, without that, I wouldn't have experienced what I did. Right. Some of what I've experienced is great. Some of it isn't so bad, but that's life, right? You're always going to run into speed bumps, right? We talk to the kids all the time about development not being linear, right? You're always gonna have those moments where you're going to fall down, and how do you respond to that? And that's really been the impetus for me to go from what I considered a no talent teenager, passing all of these players who had all the talent but didn't really have the resolve or the ability to bounce back from failure, right? And that's really what helped propel me. And I'm back in Northern California. I see all those guys that I passed along and along the way, and it gives me great satisfaction. Not because of those guys being, not because of those guys, but really because of what came from inside of me, right? So that's something that I really I'm grateful for, right? And I wouldn't change, getting to play in front of your friends and family, playing for your country, right? Playing in the top professional league, working in the league for as long as I did. I was player, coach, and executive for 15 years, right? And like, I'm not going to trade, I have that to that's, nobody's ever going to be able to take that away from me. All you got to do is go on the internet and look it up, right? You just throw in a word search and there you have it, right? I don't have to tell anybody what I did. And it's not about telling people what I did, but you know, that's for me, says a lot, right? So, and never take it for granted, right? I think, you know, having been an executive in the league, you get a lot. Like I remember some players that came along that I played with and that I had been around, where it's like, these guys just take it for granted. I'm like, you guys don't even know.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's like to scratch it together.
The
right?
Instagram is kind of sad. I don't even feel like I'm a part of it. I mean, I am a part of it, but I guys, and it's just like, you get team of the week or something like that, and friends repost your team of the week, and then your story on Instagram is 30 times your team of the week. And look, it's great, whatever, it's accomplishments, you share them, and you should, but I think sometimes it goes away from I want to win or I want to accomplish this to I want to accomplish this because I want so-and-so to see that I accomplished this.
Well,
and
I had a teammate once tell me, John Spencer. John played at Rangers. He played at Chelsea for a while, and he said, you know, individual accomplishments are great, but this is a team sport.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we play the game. Right.
Yeah.
Not for the name on the back, but for what this means, what this represents. Right. And so all of my experiences were great experiences. Right. Even if there was a downside to them. Right. You know, my club is the Colorado Rapids, and I left them in 2016 and haven't spoken to anybody since. Right. But I still respect the club for the opportunity that they gave me. Mr. Anschutz and Mr. Kroenke I will forever be indebted to, because of the opportunities that they've presented to me as a player playing in MLS. Right? That's those men. You know, those men may never remember who I am, but I will always remember who they are because of the opportunity that they gave me. So.
Yeah. I'm on a smaller scale. I feel the same way. I had a coach in Galway when I was playing in Ireland there, and he's pre-game talk. We're all in the dressing room, and he's like, it might have even been the first game of the season, so it's kind of building up. And he goes, "You are all just custodians of this jersey.
Yep.
You're here. You make great memories, and special time, and you remember them. Like I remember. We all remember everything. But it's all you're here for the year, or you're here for 5 years, but eventually everybody leaves."
Funny, I used to tell my president that all the time when I was the VP of soccer, and he would look at me like I had three heads, and it's like, no, you are just the custodian for this club. I am sitting in this seat knowing that I will eventually no longer be here, and somebody else is going to sit here. So I got to do the job to the best of my ability. Understand that it isn't for me, but it's for the future of my club. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway.
Trying to get guests, and you said, "Oh, we got Paul Bravo." I wasn't disappointed by any means, but I did not expect the wealth of knowledge that he had. And obviously, after looking him up and kind of seeing his background, I fully expected him to have some great stories. But wow, I mean, the topics that he covered, the big names, the opportunities that he had, but also just the insight he has for the players that he's coaching now with his youth clubs. He's really done everything in U.S. soccer, playing, coaching, playing internationally, playing in the Confederations Cup, starting MLS or helping start MLS. He has done it all, and he's even in the amateur and kind of semi-professional game before MLS, he's been in every era, and he's someone that's so great to talk to and has so much insight into U.S. soccer. And I think he would be a good resource for the people now, like the Pro Rel, the MLSs of the world. He could be a good just person to bounce ideas off of and see what he thinks in terms of how U.S. soccer should progress forward.
Yeah, I had a feeling, Paul would be a really good guest, because I'm just, just for the listeners that don't know, the age difference between us, it's so I'm 46, you just turned 30, so I would have been watching this era of soccer and really into that the U.S. national team, At that time, you know, in the late '80s, as it developed, and as your boy John Harkes was called up. I remember when he was first called up, and then as we moved a little forward into the '94 World Cup, and then you know this era when pre-MLS, when amateur soccer was the king, was the thing, you know, and it wasn't really amateur; it was more semi-pro. It wasn't full professional, but you know, guys are getting money and you know playing for clubs, and you have a lot of really good players and some really interesting experiences. And Paul, you know, came through in this era, and then there was the professional game in terms of the USISL, and you know, but it wasn't full-time professional. It wasn't a full season year-round or anything like that. Very, very different time. And then I remember Paul coming in, you know, when MLS came in right away. First game I watched, first game I think they showed was San Jose Clash. And I think it was against DC United. And you know, watching Paul, getting introduced to Paul, Eric Ronaldo, and Coach Laurie Callaway, and that whole San Jose Clash team, having come from that San Francisco Bay Blackhawks team, being referenced on the episode or in the game, and being introduced to it from the East Coast. You know, folks on the West Coast that around my age group might remember, and then just watching Paul progress throughout. He was just always one of those players throughout his playing career that people referenced, and you can see why. You know, national team appearances, MLS All-Star games. You know, a lot of recognition, a lot of good seasons, and then you know, getting into his later on in his career, he was, you know, front office, so we didn't, you know, he wouldn't necessarily be on the front of your radar, but when you look at his background, you can see that he was involved in a lot of different interesting eras. And like you mentioned as well, great guests to have back on. A lot more, I think we didn't even hit on. You know, we hit on a few bits and pieces throughout, but a lot more we can have him discuss and stories he can tell, but also to get his insight on the modern era with the background he has. He can give some really interesting knowledge that he can share, and thoughts and opinions that we're not going to get from other sources. And that's, I think, a big part of why we're doing this, is to reach out directly to the source, directly to the people that are involved in the game at the highest levels, that can share information with us, and knowledge that, you know, we get caught up with social media and, you know, different people, and a lot of people out there reporting in the game that don't really have the knowledge, or, you know, express opinions, but they don't have the background. You know, Scholarcep is a one like that, and Grant Wall, and these popular journalists that I've seen over the years that, you know, they comment and they share things that are opinions as facts, but I don't really, you know, I get turned off by that. I like to go directly to the source and go to someone like Paul, who was there, who saw it, who lived it, and give you the real information, the real rationale behind a lot of decisions. What Sampson, Bruce Arena would really like to play for them, to work with them, and just give you a lot more information, a lot of interesting knowledge and insight into the game and how it's grown, and why we're at where we're at now and where we're going.
Yeah, what's the saying?
So that was a long-winded way of saying, yeah, I enjoyed it.
What's the saying? It's like, to understand your present, you have to also know your past, or there's some saying like that I think is really important, because in U.S. soccer, and in all of soccer, but in U.S. soccer, there's so much of a history. And in order to fully understand, like, why don't we have promotion relegation right now? Why is MLS doing this? Why is USL Championship League One? Like, to fully understand the full system, you have to understand where it came from. So you have to understand, in '95, they had this new soccer league coming out. They didn't know what it was called, but it eventually would be called MLS. And you have to understand where it came from and how much it's grown. And yeah, it's not perfect. It's not Germany, where you have 14 divisions all perfectly lined up and everything makes perfect sense. But they started playing in 1900 or whenever it was. So there's a reason why the U.S. is a little bit behind in certain areas. And I think it's important to understand that history. And Paul was a great resource for us to learn about that history. You probably know a little bit more than I do in regards to the history of U.S. soccer. But he was there. And also, a big point is he is also, like he said, he's not affiliated with anyone right now. So many times, whether it's players, coaches, you interview them, they're still working for MLS, or they're working for Fox Sports, or they're working for ESPN, or they're working for someone that they really can't tell you the whole truth. They have to kind of bias their answers a bit in order to stay politically correct. And Paul didn't have to do that. He could just be like, Ruud wasn't professional, more or less is what he said. And he respects him as a player, loves the guy, but he didn't handle things professionally. Or you could say Beckham and Donovan's kind of rift that they had, and you can go into so many different topics that happened, but they're not always fully reported as they happen, because people are it's a business, so they don't want their businesses to fail. And the reporting, some kind of, like you said, it kind of gets swayed by biases, and maybe it's even by money a lot of times. And it was really great just to get a kind of full, at least his full story. I mean, just because he says it and it's his opinion and it's his truth doesn't mean it's the whole truth. But I think it's completely
important point.
Yeah, it's completely unbiased though, and his opinions are not swayed. And I think it was unbelievable insight. The Brazil story, I obviously had no idea about it. My jaw was on the floor when he's like, "Yeah, I didn't make the World Cup squad because of my ACL, but I got to train with Brazil." I'm like, that's freaking awesome. I mean, like,
wasn't exactly the worst, consolation prize there.
I know. Could you imagine? You're like, yeah, look, I mean, you're hosting the World Cup in '94. Obviously, I'm sure he's bummed out he wasn't in that squad, because that was a historic squad in New York soccer. But he got to train with all the big Cafu and Romário and all the big Brazilian players, and then the young 17-year-old Ronaldo he's probably playing up front with on the second team. So it's just, what an incredible career. What a great guy. The amount of time he took with us today was awesome. So we can't thank him enough, huh?
Yeah. Looking forward to having him back on. And, definitely a big part of why, my motivation and interest in doing a podcast like this is to get, somebody like Paul on and be able to share his story, his insight, and to get that unbiased opinion, with so much of the media now being, well, I don't want to say controlled, but I guess they are controlled by MLS, because, a lot of the independent media has fallen off in soccer. There's not a lot of money, for the guys to make to be able to do it. So a lot of them either work for MLS, or they just aren't reporting on soccer anymore. They're doing other things. There's not a lot of independent media out there. There's not a lot of independent voices. So, I think it's just really important to have somebody like Paul and other folks as well that are independent, and they can give you unbiased opinions so that folks can know what's really going on and learn from it. So.
Yeah. And for those of you who do not think that these reporters are biased, or in some instances even, just look at, we shouldn't talk politics on this show. This will be the last time, but look at the same story being reported by CNN and Fox, and it's completely different. Yeah. I guarantee you, on a much smaller scale, I guarantee you the same thing is happening in soccer.
Well, just look at Shep Messing. Some people like him, some people hate him for the Red Bulls. When he comments on the games, he's a lot more open. But if you watch the commentators for a lot of the other games, you're going to get a lot less. They're more biased, definitely, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it in that realm too. There's not many out there that they're working for. They have to keep a job. They can't be too critical of the team. Some are, but for the most part, they aren't. And they kind of, I don't think they're too much of a home team, commentator, but they just try to call what they see. But Shep is definitely one that, if the Red Bulls aren't playing well, he'll be pretty honest about it and open. So, there's a few others like that as well. But for the most part, a lot of the media, is reporting, from MLS. It's when you're writing for MLS, and it's not a criticism. It is what it is. MLS has to put out content promote itself, share information, share news. So they do a great job of it. It's just that you need independent media as well and independent coverage to get the real insight and get beyond just what the company line is. So it's interesting to hear him talk about the NISA League, and experiences with that. That's something we've heard bits and pieces about, but not a lot of really good journalism on it. Most of the journalism that I've seen, not really very credible, very biased. They're more on the other side with the promotion relegation and the advocates for that. Their interest in that, but just interesting to get more of a full picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the NISA League, what he said about wanting everything under one umbrella was very interesting, because that would not be the company line of a lot of the teams, especially the Cosmos, which we both are very well aware of. They want to be completely separate from all things MLS, kind of U.S. soccer. And personally, I think we've discussed it. I think it would be awesome if these teams would come into USL Championship or USL League One and just create one pyramid. And does it have to be promotion relegation with MLS? Maybe not right away, maybe not ever. But between Championship, League One, maybe even eventually when you have League Two and you can make it more regionalized, I think that's the way to go in U.S. soccer. I think it's very feasible. If you don't include MLS, it's very feasible. And then the addition of those NISA teams, Oakland Roots, who is already coming, Chattanooga, great following, New York Cosmos, great following, Detroit City, great following, and there's others, Michigan Stars, Cal Strikers. The San Diego Loyal team was meant to come in, I think, or not San Diego Loyal, 1904 San Diego, the team with Demba Hazard. Bring all these independent clubs into USL, and if the two teams, which has been reported recently, want to leave and they want to have their own MLS Reserve League, then that's fine. And then you just have independent teams in USL Championship, USL League One, and then go from there. I think it'd be a really entertaining. I mean, it's already entertaining. I love watching the Championship. I love watching League One. I do watch more USL, both of my own league and of Championship, than I do of MLS. Now, that's not because I think it's better. I'm more interested because I know a lot more of the players. I'm very familiar with the level of play, and I think it's really entertaining soccer. And I think it can only get better the more high-quality independent teams with good followings that are in the league.
Yeah, I think you do have to introduce an element of promotion and relegation into American soccer. I don't know exactly how it takes form because, from a business perspective, you do have to keep a model like MLS has, where I think for the American audience, you do have to keep it balanced so that there is competitive balance with where any team can realistically win the league. Otherwise, I think financially it's going to be hard to do. It's going to be hard to be feasible. But I do think that's a whole other topic for a whole other episode or series of episodes for another day. But I'll just leave it at that. I think you do need to introduce promotion relegation. I'm just not sure how exactly it takes form. So we'll see how it plays out over the days and months and years to come.
Can't wait. Hopefully I'm still playing when that gets introduced. That would be exciting to play in.
Yeah, you probably will be. You'll be playing until you're like 45, so
Yeah, I'm one leg with a cane as a goalkeeper.
Well, that was a great episode, and thanks again for another great week, Jake. Looking forward to our next episode as well.
Yeah, we got a second episode. Or no, this is our second episode of the week. So we are wrapped up for the week. We will see you next week. We look forward to it. Maybe we'll have another guest on. Maybe it'll be just me and Dave. You'll have to wait and see. But thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.